What's up, guys? We're back with part one of my path to Orthodoxy. And where I'll start off is authority. So, I can remember sitting in a Presbyterian church, and the Pastor Eric, one Sunday, it might have been in Sunday school or it might have been in his actual sermon, ask the question, by what authority do you administer the sacraments? This was a very different question that at the time I had never actually gone through the exercises on. Now, his point was Presbyterian church government. He was sent by presbytery, he was ordained by presbytery, he sat under their authority, as opposed to a congregationalist church where, theoretically I can rent a building and set up a church. Now, what I'll say is this issue really only becomes an issue if you think that the sacraments do something. If you don't think that the sacraments do anything, if baptism is just a profession of faith and communion is just a memorial liturgical supper, then the ask on authority is fairly low. You don't have to have a whole lot of authority to sit over a memorial supper and to dunk somebody in water because they say, I believe. All right? However, as soon as you say that the sacraments do something, and they do something extraordinary, then you have to ask, does the person administering them, or the body administering them, have the authority to make them do that? So, the higher view of sacrament you have, the higher the need for valid authority, proper authority to actually administer them becomes. So this was a very interesting question. And I sat and I thought on it. And the only difference to me, after thinking about it, between the validity in a presbytery versus the validity in a congregationalist setting was about 500 years. Because ultimately, that presbytery, if you go all the way back, was sent by another presbytery or synod. And you go back to, sometime in the Protestant Reformation, a group of guys broke away from the Catholic Church, started doing their own thing. Now, granted, I'm not minimizing that and saying, they did it with any bad intention. I'm just saying they started their own thing. Taking a very generous reading of who they are and what they meant to do. Sure, they felt 100% they were honoring Scripture, but they started doing their own thing. So that answer didn't really sit very well with me. So, what did I do? Well, not long after that, we were forced to move back to Houston for my job. And when we moved back to Houston, we started attending an Anglican church. Aha! There's a loophole. You can be Protestant and have a bishop that goes all the way back to St. Peter. Now, what I'll say about Anglicanism, I will say briefly, and I will say Anglicanism has a very special place in my heart. But because of certain objections and questions that came up, Anglicanism was a discontinuity, or it's a discontinuity with the Catholic Church. There's no two ways about it. Now, you can say, okay, well, yeah, but they're reclaiming the faith of the first millennium. So it's a restorationist movement. And there are some that make that argument. And if you look at, within different groups of Anglicanism, you will see people that are very much into icons, very, what you would call Anglo-Catholic. But that's not all of Anglicanism. Anglicanism has very Catholic, in that sense, Catholic, a very Catholic dimension. They also have a very low church evangelical dimension. They have a Reformed dimension. They're all over the place. It's more of a reformation of ecclesiology than it was of theology in the long term. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Dr. Ryan Reed he was at Gordon Conwell at one point. I don't know if he's still there. Actually has some great lectures on church history that are worth checking out. But anyways, I digress. So the question comes up, well, are Anglican bishops still valid? They broke with the church. They broke away from the church. They didn't stay with the church. They broke away. And that was a wrestling match, a mental wrestling match. And the answer I came up with in the most generous terms is, I don't know, I can't tell. They had entered into, during the 70s, the mainline denomination in the U.S. actually entered into fraternal talks with, I think it was the Russian church. It might have been Rokor, but it was either the Russian church or the Russian Orthodox church outside Russia. One of the two, if memory serves correct. And they were talking about fraternal relationships, mutual recognition, and even communion. And that kind of fell apart. I think it was with women's ordination. So I looked at what was going on in the Anglican universe, and I don't know. I don't know. And that's, I say that because I don't want anybody that sees this to think that I'm taking anything away from the people that are there. I love those people. I love so many people within the Anglican Church. And I don't want people to take this the wrong way. The question was, is there still that valid line of authority? And my answer was, man, I just don't know. So that leaves me with two choices, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. I started out looking at the theologies, and I was very familiar with the Catholic Church. But I realized something somewhere along the way. And it was this. If we're discussing authority, we're discussing something that's pre-theological. Okay? If you're in the Protestant universe, typically what you do is, if you come from an unchurched background, you start evaluating the theologies of the Protestant groups around you. You find the one that lines up with your reading of Scripture, and that's where you go. You can almost do a flow chart of where you belong within Protestantism. And it's, a group of people who understand the Bible to mean roughly the same thing in response to different points. With the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, that's not the question, because the contention isn't a contention of being just theologically correct. The contention is who they are, which is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. All right? So when you get into that question, it is a question of authority. And it doesn't matter if you agree with them or not, because this question logically precedes the theological question. You know, you can't argue with, as an analogy, you can't argue with the author of a book or a song about what that book or a song means, because they're the ones that wrote it. So the contention of the Catholic and the Orthodox Church are that they are the one true, holy, Catholic and Apostolic Church, delivering the faith, or preserving the faith once and for all. The faith that was handed down by Christ to his apostles and has been a continuous line since then. That's a profoundly different question than a theological question, you know. And there are a couple theological questions I'll get to and touch on in separate videos. But this is the real question that I had to wrestle with, you know. And this isn't like, these videos aren't in order chronologically. They're different aspects that popped up. So what I was left to wrestle with was, is the Orthodox Church who it says it is? If they're not, then it doesn't matter, because then they're on the same level as all of the Protestant churches that I've attended, and I'm looking for theological agreement more than I am a genuine continuation of authority. However, if they are, then that means something different entirely. Because, like I said, this is a pre-theological discussion. I can't even come to the table and argue with the authority if they are the authority. I have to submit to the authority. So yeah, authority, it's a crazy question and a crazy avenue to start going down. Anyway, so I'll wrap this one up here, running right at about 13 minutes. So like I said, 10 to 15 minutes of video. Try to keep these a little bit punchier, and try not to have such a big ask as far as time commitment. Thank you guys for watching, and have another one out soon. Later.